Hello everybody, my name is Will and welcome back to Sprocket once again. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different to usual and we're going to be following kind of like a law, I guess. We're going to be looking at like a world that I've made up and we're going to be designing tanks for a country in that world. And this, if you like it, might become a bit of a thing that we do every now and then. I can't guarantee it'll be every video, but yeah, we might try and get some kind of almost tech tree going for this country. But yeah, without any further ado, I'll explain the law and I'll show you the map in the sped up section while I go ahead and build a tank, I guess. Okay, so I think the best way to really start this sped up section is to show you the map. So here it is, there you go. And the tank that we're designing today is for the nation of Chisford, which is the yellow one, kind of to the east, just before you reach Persbury. Persbury? I don't know. I just kind of generated this online. There's a really good tool for this stuff, which I can't entirely remember the name of right now. Hang on one second. It is Asgar's Fantasy Map Generator. There's so many settings that you can play around with this thing. It was genuinely really quite fun to play around with. But I ended up with this little section of a map that I decided that I wanted to go for. So the law for Chisford is as thus. Chisford is an old power. It was originally powerful for a very long time and previously have shown their might in a number of wars with neighbours both north and south. They sit in an uneasy peace with Persbury to their east, Saruland to their north, and West Carrier to their south. Due to Chisford quickly industrialising, their industry is a strong point. While citizens here tend to be poorer than those in Persbury, they are richer than those in Saruland or West Carrier. This results in Chisford holding a strong industrial base from which they can produce large numbers of tanks, aircraft, and sustain a moderate navy. As a result, they pose a significant threat to their neighbours who have chosen to sign into two separate defensive pacts, one between Saruland, Persbury, and Newchester, and one between West Carrier and Axland. Thus lies out the situation. You got the Northern Alliance, which is Saruland, Newcastle, and Persbury, led by Saruland, and the Southern Pact, which is West Carrier and Axland, led even by West Carrier. Chisford stands alone with no allies at this point in time. They are uneasy at the state of affairs going on around them, given that everybody's in a pact apart from them, and they want to mobilise in secret and attempt to invade Axland to the south, taking the capital, which lies to the north of the river, before any effective resistance can be upheld, forcing their enemies into the negotiating room. So there is my very, very brief law. So I've left it deliberately brief because we have some lore channels in my Discord, so feel free, if you want, to think about the nations, think about the tanks that could be built, and leave a couple suggestions for what we could do with the tanks, what we could do with the nations, and what the other nations' tanks should be like. That could be fun. Okay, so we have a very basic shape of a hull going on here. Obviously, these gearboxes won't be sticking out in the final thing. In fact, let me just move those in there. So we've got a rear sprocketed tank with a little engine deck here, some exhaust management things, and this kind of boat shape to the front of the hull. This is kind of cruiser tanky. I want to do something with this where it doesn't look quite so open. Like, I want to add some more boxing in of this machinery here. But yeah, I don't think this is a bad shape for the hull. Now, what I am being somewhat aware of is I don't want to design it too much in a way that's going to limit me in the future, because this is kind of going to be the blueprint from which a lot of their interwar tank designs are going to be built. So moving forwards, I'm going to follow a couple of these principles really, and just modify them as we go forward. So yeah, fingers crossed I don't dig myself too deep of a trench here. So, based on that law that I said before I rudely interrupted myself, you can understand where this tank is coming from just a little bit, and where I was thinking of when this tank was being constructed. So, obviously the idea here is that while they have the industry, therefore we can use things like welded construction and cast construction without having to worry too much about not having the trained factory workers to do that, which is obviously why Britain reverted to riveted construction. They've got availability for those construction methods, but this is attempted to be built in secret, so not many people know about it. Therefore, it's being left entirely internally, presumably to one company or like a government design bureau. So there's not a huge amount of minds working on this, which means there's a couple of things that are going to be left unexploited about the design. There's going to be a couple of flaws that would have otherwise been ironed out. This is, for all intents and purposes, a stopgap measure. They are building a tank in order to have a tank on the field. Anybody else, hopefully, wouldn't know about this vehicle and wouldn't really be directly countering it. So therefore, they're hoping that they can make a quick breakthrough with this vehicle, and as if the war develops and they need to add more onto it, they're trying to develop in the kind of flexibility to put bigger guns, bigger engines, etc. onto this chassis without having to completely refactor their construction lines. And what you see me putting on here is actually a little mud scraper, which is perhaps a little bit overkill on the details, but the general gist of this is I saw it at Tank Fest on the M1344, whatever, the Italian medium tank, and I thought that's a really cool idea, actually. That's a very neat idea to just get mud off your sprocket wheel. You don't have to worry too badly about it getting clogged up. And also, I'm putting on some leaf springs here. I don't know how logical that really is with 3 wheels in a group, but it looks cool, so why not? But yeah, generally this tank is a little bit flawed. It's not perfect. So you'll see such things as the turret being a little bit weird for the size of the gun. That's been done in my mind as a result of trying to make sure that it can handle a bigger gun in the future, which is why the gun is a little bit small on this thing. Not that you can see that yet. And also the design features, I was kind of being inspired by the cruiser tanks, like the early A9, A10 cruisers, back when Britain didn't really know what they were doing, as well as a little bit of Panzer II influence in there with the engine deck. Generally tanks that they had something going for them, but they didn't really know fully what they were doing, so fingers crossed. I've tried to replicate that a little bit. This tank definitely looks a little strange overall, and I've tried to do that in a way that makes it look like I didn't just build an ugly thing, but like I built an ugly thing well, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Trying to make it look like these were things that were missed on the design team or done as a compromise rather than just me being bad at building. So fingers crossed that actually comes through. And what we'll probably try and do at some point this week is put a couple more turrets and guns on this, maybe as a members only stream, and then I'll show those off in a video at some point, maybe the next video we do if we turn this into a little bit of a series. But you're gonna have to let me know if you want to see that, and feel free to join as a member if you want to see the stream. Okay, I think this is our hull roughly done, so what I'm actually gonna do now is a little bit unusual. I'm gonna try and work out the internals for this engine bay and put in a fire door before I put the turret on, which is normally not the order I do things in, but I'm hoping it'll just make sure that the engine bay isn't an afterthought and everything feels like it should go together in the way it does. So yeah, bear with me. So, as always with sections like this, I just want to preface this with I'm not an engineer. It is entirely possible that what I do now with the gearbox is completely nonsensical. However, you know, it makes it fit and it makes it work within Sprocket. So if I can do it, I'm gonna do it. You can't stop me. But yeah, hopefully it's not too insane. Generally, I tried to put the transmissions kind of longitudinally rather than transverse, which probably isn't the best decision ever, but they really wouldn't fit widthways otherwise. This is not a big tank. This is a fairly small tank as things go. Probably fits into the medium designation given the armor and the caliber of firepower put on this tank, and we will probably come up with a light tank at some point as well. Maybe just an infantry focus or a reconnaissance focus light tank to go alongside this. Maybe even a heavy tank, but I'm not entirely sure. once again, let me know what you want to see. Okay, so there is our engine deck and also our machinery room put in. And now what we need to do is get a turret on this bad boy. So we're probably going to have one guy in the hull here, so we don't need to worry too much about accounting for multiple crew members in the actual hull itself, but I would like a minimum of 2 crew in the turret, maybe 3, but maybe not. I think it's probably going to end up being a 2-man turret, to be honest. So the turret on this thing is, in my opinion, where things start to get a little bit rocky. I'm not entirely convinced with the path I went down, but I ended up spending so long on it that I just kind of went for it. So eventually I decided on a cast turret, which I thought would be for the best, but perhaps not. I don't really know. The problem with it is that it doesn't really seem to fit the hull hugely well. I probably should have gone with something a little bit more like the cruiser hull. Sorry, the cruiser turrets from the like A9, A13, A10, whatever, because I feel like that probably would have fit the vibe a little bit more, but I wanted to distance myself from those kind of early British designs because we're not in the same boat as Britain, and therefore the design limitations that resulted in the cruiser turrets wouldn't exist here. So I wanted to go a little bit more German with the turret, but I also wanted to kind of almost pull in a little bit of that French feel almost. So France obviously had a pretty good amount of access to casting machinery, and therefore a lot of their turrets were cast, and that's kind of what I wanted to get at here. You know, this country is not poor, they are not struggling, they are fully capable of utilizing all of these construction methods, and they will for the best effect. And obviously the turret needs to be the most defended part of the tank. They are fighting mostly in fields, but even so, even a small hill or a small bunker will be enough to hide the hull of the tank, so the turret's going to be the most focused part, and casting provides you the best protection to the weight and the material expended. So given that they can cast, they will cast, and therefore that's the reason I went for it as the turret construction method. It just, yeah, I don't know, the hull just feels a little bit too primitive for casting, so yeah, maybe that was a little bit of a misstep on my behalf. But for the most part, I think it all comes together in a reasonable way, and it kind of gives me a turret that, while it won't be easy to until we have the ability to save compartments, I might just be able to steal the turret and place it onto another tank, as I've seen that is possible with a little bit of file editing. So, yeah, we can give that a shot at some point in time. And the front of the turret here definitely looks a little bit Panzer II. I didn't want a one-man turret, which obviously, given that I was comparing it to French tanks a second ago, is a little bit ironic given that most of the cast French turrets were one-man turrets, such as the one on the Shah B1 and like the Samur SM. Samur SM? Not SM. The Samur S40 or something along those. I'm completely forgetting the name of it, but you know the one I mean. The the one that was available to them at the start of the war. And I saw one at Tank Fest. That's kind of what's got it stuck in my head at the moment. I do think that's a really, really cool tank. But yeah, the front of the turret and the turret in general, I wanted to fit 2 or maybe even 3 people in. It could very well fit 3 people if I put a cupola on the top of this thing, but because I didn't decide to put a cupola on it in the end, we just have that one central hatch in the middle of it. We've gone more Panzer II, but then we don't want a 20mm, so we've yeah, it's a little bit strange. I think you'll agree, but I think overall, it's alright. It's not the worst. Maybe I've got some work to do on this thing, though. Okay, so we have a turret on this thing. I'm not convinced that it's the most fitting. Also, like, I feel like the front of this turret is a little bit jagged. I kind of want to fix that, but if I try and split the face, it doesn't work. Oh, pain. But yeah, we got something going here, and I think it's a reasonable basis, because even though the law for this country, as you've probably heard, is that they are quite well off in terms of their facilities to build tanks, experience in building tanks is still limited. So this is kind of unconventional looking, but I think that's fine given the situation that they're in at the moment. So yeah, hopefully you don't think that this is completely hideous. What I'm going to try and do now is fit the crew in and make any adjustments that need to happen once that is in, and obviously put a gun on this bad boy. And fingers crossed it ends up looking pretty good in the end, but we'll see, shall we? So now, obviously I've been referring to how good this thing looks, or how bad this thing looks a lot this episode. This is where you can really start to get an idea of the scale of this thing. Now, bear in mind, once again, bear in mind that this is not the gun that was intended to be put on this tank, much in the way that the Panzer III was intended to fit the 50mm gun, but ended up having a 37mm gun available to it, and therefore that's what it fit. This tank has a 42mm gun, with the eventual plan to upgun it to maybe something more along the scale of 60 to 75, maybe even 80mm cannon. So that is why the gun on this thing looks a little bit small and a little bit silly. It is intentional on my behalf. I hope you agree that it kind of makes sense from where this tank is coming from. This is a very, very early war design, but the turret has been intended to fit a larger gun in the future, so therefore it looks a little bit strange right now. That might make sense, that might not make sense. Maybe you think I could have done something a little bit different with the mantler. If you do have any ideas, feel free to download this thing and have a go for yourself at fixing it up. And if you do that, make sure you just ping me in my Discord. I want to see what your guys' takes on this thing would be. So I don't mind in this case. I won't ban you, don't worry. Link to my Discord will be in the description. If I've forgotten to post the tank files, just ping me. I either won't be available and I'll try and remember to do it later, or I'll be there and I'll do it at the time. But yeah, I am just a little bit of an idiot, so sometimes I just forget to do that. We've not even gone that far on a tangent this episode. Perhaps this is good, perhaps this is bad. We'll see from the view count, I guess, ultimately. But yeah, I don't know. I had fun with this one. It's fun to build a world. It's fun to then apply some logic to that world and tie it into our world in a way, I guess. It's maybe not the most logical world ever. Perhaps there are better thought out ones, but you can help me with that, as I referred to earlier. I might make a channel just for this, or it might just be something for the vehicle lore channel in my Discord. That is probably where it'll initially be anyway. So fingers crossed that's not too chaotic, and I'll try, if we do more episodes, to update you with what I've decided kind of goes into the canon and what doesn't. And hopefully we can have some kind of world update at the start of every episode. I don't know, that would be cool. But yeah, we're very, very nearly done now. I want to make sure that we had a coaxial machine gun on this thing, because otherwise you would be only rocking a 42mm gun, which is definitely more of an anti-tank weapon than it is an anti-infantry weapon. And on that topic, we probably should design at least a light tank, maybe an infantry tank, just to support this thing where it is unable to defend the infantry to the full capabilities, as you can only imagine that a 42mm gun's high explosive shell wouldn't be spectacular. It would be sufficient for, certain situations, but that's the reason why you got tanks with 75mm howitzers, with 100mm howitzers, and therefore we should probably reflect that in our world. Yeah, anyway, I've run out of things to say, I think. I think I've pretty much covered off everything. So I just want to say it was great at Tank Fest. That's where I was this weekend, and I'm back now. I met one whole person who watched my channel who had Laserpig merch. He was wearing Laserpig merch. So, yeah, there you go. I guess I maybe should sell some of my own merch so that people can start wearing my merch instead of Laserpigs, because obviously I am more powerful and would win a fight with Laserpigs. I'm not going to say that in any way, shape or form. That is such a bad idea to say that. Anyway, we're nearly done here, so we'll just wrap things up and move on to the bit where we actually test this tank. So yeah, don't forget to let me know in the comments if you like this idea. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of this idea. There you go. There's the plugs. And have a wonderful day. Let's go test this tank and see how it does, shall we? Okay, we're gonna call this thing, I believe, just about done. So we've ended up with 3 crew members in this thing with quite a lot of room left to spare, to be entirely honest. I wanted to give us a little bit of room to be able to upgrade this gun, so since we're not constrained to the real-life gun calibers which tended to be used, so 37, 40, and 45 millimeters, I thought we'd go for a little bit of a weird caliber. I've thrown on a 42 millimeter cannon, for no particular reason other than we can. We can do something a little bit different. So this thing has 77 millimeters of penetration, which for this time, I don't even think is too bad. And as you can see, it doesn't seem to... yes, I've forgotten to assign the crew to roles. That's quite an important job, actually. Okay, there we go. Now the crew actually have roles, and as you can see, it is a little bit of a light tank kind of deal going on. Everything is a little bit blurry at the moment. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, there we go. We've made things a little bit more sensible for the actual traverse drive and the laying drive. And as you can see, we've got a little pop 42 millimeter gun, as I said, and we have a bit of a weird leaf spring suspension thing going on. I don't know, maybe it looks cool, maybe it doesn't. It does feel like the suspension is a little bit too soft, so I might just strengthen up the torsion bars a little bit, but we should have a pretty rapid rate of fire with this 42 millimeter in theory. I think it's going to reload in about, 3 seconds-ish, so that's not bad at all. With 77 millimeters of penetration, it would be able to go through itself in places. It has 50 millimeters of frontal armor, which is pretty good for this era, and it's not bad speed. You do have to take into account that the engines for this era are a little bit overpowered, as in 0.2 we only have late World War II tech, really. So yeah, that's alright. I do feel like there is a little bit of a problem here in when I rotate the turret. You can see how much the camera's moving to follow it because of the center of gravity shifting, which is not incredible, but it's not the worst thing in the world. One thing I am interested to see is how this thing actually does over these suspension tests, because it might not be incredible. Yeah, actually, that's not too bad. It could be much worse. But yeah, this is basically the first tank that I have built for this country. So the idea here is, obviously, this is a bit of a test tank. It's maybe a stopgap measure. They're not entirely sure what they want. And I've tried to use welded construction on the hull and cast construction on the hull. Goodness me, English is failing me. Welded construction on the hull and cast construction on the turret, just to really, make use of all of the factories that they have available to them. As a wealthy nation, they would have ample, trained employees for both welding and for casting. Obviously, casting is a lot more of an expensive process, but in this case, they were willing to give it a shot for the return in armor effectiveness that it gives. And from certain angles, this tank actually looks pretty neat. From certain angles, it is also a little bit goofy. I think this side of the turret in general is a little tiny bit goofy. So if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to see me do with this hull, I feel like we should develop it a little bit further. That might be a members-only stream thing we do, where we trial out different guns, different turrets, etc. on this hull, and then I'll show them off in the next video, or perhaps I'll do a video where I go through all of the designs that we've come up with for the country that we're kind of pretending to be, I guess. But yeah, fingers crossed you've enjoyed this one. Let me know if you want to see more stuff like this, where it's a little bit put into context with the world, or if this isn't your cup of tea and you'd rather me just do normal stuff. But either way, it was worth a try, and I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in the future. But for now, goodbye! So normally now I would read out all of the names, but I genuinely don't think it's possible this week without speeding my voice up a ridiculous amount. Thank you so much for Terra for so many gifted subs in the last stream. All of the names are on screen right now, so yeah, man.